Good morning, family. Welcome to the African Esquire show on We Charge Colonialism TV. I have some technical difficulties this morning, so nothing's new, I guess. But I think everything's ironed out. So please let me know whenever you're in the chat if you can hear me okay, just so that I know that I'm coming through fine and that my internet's not really messing me up. But hello, everyone. Welcome to a new week with the African Esquire show. Today, we're going to talk about the fact that we're almost at 1 year since Magufuli. Tomorrow exactly will be 1 year since the death of President John Magufuli inside of Tanzania. And it's a real good perspective because it's a year in review. Magufuli was a very progressive leader in Africa. He was very much also a pariah to the West for many reasons. I think the chief reasons are economic, although they try to pretend that the big reason that he was a pariah to the West is because of his COVID policies. But we should know that internal COVID policies, as opposed to someone taking stances against imperialism, stances against the neocolonial setup of certain countries, those are two very different things in the eyes of the West. But it's been a year since he's been passed away. And so Tanzania has, I think, adopted a number of policies that we can say are concerning. And we're going to discuss this. We're going to discuss this in light of some problems, though, when it comes to the African experience. One problem is that we've seen that whenever it came to his vice president, President Samia Suluhu Hassan becoming president of Tanzania, that the West automatically jumped on her and embraced her. And the reason why we were told they were embracing her was because of her being a woman, very similar to how we see women, Black women, particularly inside of this era, being utilized to shield criticisms of imperialism, to basically hide motives when it comes to the West. We've seen this obviously with the WTO's director. We've seen this also obviously with Kamala Harris. We see this with a lot of different positioning when it comes to the international politics. Everything is trying to escalate the colonial agenda, but using the excuse that we're also going to promote diversity and have Black women leading these institutions. That's a way that the colonists has been trying to manipulate our politics. Another way, though, for us to look at this issue is, number one, to understand that there's an issue when it comes to national politics. Can national politics truly liberate the people when ultimately it only takes one person to be taken out or one party to be to experience a coup many times when it comes to Africa, for many great reforms for the African people to be completely undone? And I think that's really what was the case with President John Magufuli. We're going to go through and talk about some of the great reforms that you may or may not have heard of that he instituted during his presidency. And yet, all of these things that he was doing, we can see that the current president is really undoing a lot of them, or is positioning herself to undo a lot of them. And this goes right back to the issue: is national politics in itself going to be the liberator of the African continent, or is it something else? Is there something beyond these institutions, these constitutions that many times were written by the colonists? Is there something beyond these institutions that we can look to for what our liberation is going to come from? And I would argue, yes, that we have to look outside of these political elections, these political parties, for ways to understand ways that we can understand liberation and sovereignty as a people. So we're going to talk about that as well. So before we get into the nits and grits of this, if that's a word, just want to remind everyone, again, this is We Charge Colonialism TV. And We Charge Colonialism TV is the YouTube platform for We Charge Colonialism, a pan-African think tank that's anti-colonial, anti-imperialist. You can go to our website. You can do a number of things on our website. You can donate to us if you would like to. You could also sign up for our newsletter. And in addition, you can sign up for the AUMD conference. I'm going to play a video whenever it's time for break for a promo video for the AUMD conference. And so we'll talk more about that whenever we get to the break. And so I just want to remind you all that we are an organization. It's not just individuals that are trying to put out things on the internet, but we have an agenda. We have an aim. The aim is that we need to raise the consciousness of our people when it comes to the colonial discourse. And unfortunately, if we rely on mainstream media to tell us our stories, we're not going to get at the direct center of our issues, at the heart of our issues. The heart of our issues is the colonial system, the global colonial system. Until we are able to address that, we're going to be inside of a situation that is very reminiscent to what we are in today. So let's get into this story. I want to first start with sharing an article to kind of let you see how is it that the West was poisoning itself when it comes to the current president of Tanzania. How is it that they were basically trying to position her to basically, I would say, take a turn on a lot of the policies of Magufuli. So this is an article, the conversation, again, a Western newspaper. We're going to actually use a lot of Western sources because I wanted you to see from the horse's mouth essentially how African people are being manipulated by these imperialist forces. So this is written in March of 2022. And they said that Tanzania is getting a political remake as President Hassan eyes the 2025 polls. So essentially, she was sworn in as president because Magufuli passed away, but now they're looking for her to possibly run for election. So how did Hassan get to him? The Constitution of Tanzania provides for a power sharing between the mainland and Zanzibar. If a presidential party candidate comes from the mainland Tanzania, the running mate should come from Zanzibar and vice versa. I want you to remember that feature of the Constitution of Tanzania because this goes back to or national politics, really how we're going to figure this out, or is there another way? So basically, inside of the Constitution of Tanzania, you have to have a power sharing arrangement. So Magufuli had to have a vice president that's going to come from Zanzibar. They says, does Hassan have the mettle for national politics? The role of VP in Tanzania is largely ceremonial, like it is in most countries. But Samia Suluhu Hassan, who was the country's first vice president, executed her role well. Now, Magufuli rarely made foreign trips. He only visited a few African countries and attended the AU summit once. He never attended the annual United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York. So in the minds of the imperialists, you have someone who's not really trying to engage with the international major institutions, all like that. So in their mind, it's like, what's up with him, right? So he didn't want to engage with them too much. If he was going to leave Tanzania, it was more times going to be for him going to an African country, which is something I think we should admire, right? But on many occasions, Hassan has represented the president. This exposure is evident from the way that she embraced the international community and the drastic change from the COVID denialism of her predecessor. Magufuli had overseen a period of international obscurity and isolationism. So again, they're criticizing him because he did not want to meddle with the Western major institutions. He did not want to be in bed with the United Nations and all these different international organizations. Essentially, he was more internal focused. And if he was going to leave Tanzania, he was going to leave to go to another African country, not to go to the West, right? Now, in the years since she assumed office, President Hassan has made many international visits and welcomed high-level foreign dignitaries to Tanzania. They include, and we're going to talk more about this, Tony Blair, World Bank Managing Director Murray Pangestu, and African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina. At the domestic level, she's navigated the political terrain at the national and political party levels. Previously viewed as a naive CCM outsider, she has tactfully maneuvered the party factions. The way she dealt with rebellion from the Speaker of Parliament, for instance, shows her maturing political statecraft. So going down, they said, is her presidential term going to just be transitional? Well, they're basically, I think, portioning that she should not just be a transitional president, but that she should be the actual president of Tanzania. So in September 2021, she announced she'd be running for president 2025. This was seen as a response to critics, especially from the ruling party, who basically did not want her to basically take on the presidency afterwards. They said, how would you compare her to her predecessor? President Hassan has undone most of the excesses that characterize her predecessor. Now, I want you to remember, Magufuli was loved by Tanzania, but they said that she has inherited a deeply divided country at the peak of COVID-19 pandemic, with her predecessor who responded by calling for national prayers. Magufuli came in as a relatively unknown candidate in 2015 elections. He benefited from factional divisions to win the presidential nomination. Gradually, he was able to build a political base within the party. Hassan was considered a party outsider also. She has been careful not to completely upset the old guard. She seems to have the goodwill of the former president, Jakaya Kikwete, and that's something else to remember, because Magufuli, as we're going to talk about, undid a lot of the previous reforms of this previous president, and this same president she also has been using as an advisor. She appointed Kikwete's son in her last cabinet reshuffle. And Magufuli had an abrasive approach. Again, this is in the words or the eyes of the West. He had an abrasive approach in dealing with government officials and international investors. Hassan's approach has been more candor and civility. And investors, of course, that's the number one agenda when it comes to a country that's very much rich like Tanzania. So I hope that I set this up for you as far as how is it that she is being poised against Magufuli. Magufuli is, in the eyes of the West, as you're going to see, he was depicted as a tyrant. He was depicted as an illogical buffoon by the West, like someone who was just like, hey, COVID is fake. They highly tried to make it look like it was his COVID policies that were the reason why he was not beloved. But really, it goes down to his economic policies, how he held minors accountable inside of Tanzania. That's really where they really knew that they were dealing with a different type of person. And yet for her, she's engaging the West, she's going on international visits, and so she's basically poisoning herself to be beloved by the West, and that's how they're going to market her. So this is an important lesson for us to understand when we're talking about having revolutionary people stepping into the office of the presidency, that there's always an intentional effort to undo everything that person has done. And if we're not careful to not just focus on having people who are elected that represent our politics, but having a organizational structure that is representative and engaged with by the masses of African people who can also push those same revolutionary policies, then it's very easy for another leader to replace the previous leader and to completely go the opposite direction of our more revolutionary leaders. So this has happened many times throughout history, and this is what I believe is what's happening right now inside of Tanzania. So we're going to go more into this. We're going to talk more about what Magufuli was doing that made him a pariah to the West, and 1 year later, here we are with President Samia Suluhu, how I think she's basically reversing course on a number of issues. So first, I'm going to play our news segment, and we're going to talk about some other stories that are happening inside of the African diaspora. Then we'll come back and finish off with this story about Magufuli. So the first thing that I want to talk about actually goes back to one of the many contradictions of the West when it comes to this whole Ukraine-Russia issue. This is basically how they have been sanctioning the mess out of Russia because they invaded Ukraine. And yet we're starting to see that there are other sanctions going on that the West has pushed. And these sanctions are completely arbitrary, or completely not to the point of what they're trying to say that they're sanctioning Russia for. So they're saying they're sanctioning Russia because Russia is being a tyrant, or they're invading a sovereign country. But yeah, you're sanctioning a country like Zimbabwe for just exercising sovereignty over their own territory. And this is the contradictions of the West. Now, I was surprised that Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, he was actually the one to bring this up. He's on his way out of office, I believe, so he's maybe speaking a little bit more outwardly against certain things than he would normally. But it says Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has called on the international community to lift sanctions against Zimbabwe, stating the restrictions are hurting the Southern African nation. In if you think about it, we're hearing all day in the news how the sanctions against Russia are really depleting Putin. And, this is what they're saying. This is what they're telling us, that these sanctions are having a horrible effect on the Russian economy. They're saying that Russia could default on its debts today, possibly, if not tomorrow or sometime this week. And that's a whole nother story. That could literally cause shockwaves throughout the entire world. And they're saying there could be a whole recession over this. But they're saying that these sanctions are doing these horrible, debilitating effects to the Russian economy. But when you think about a smaller country like Zimbabwe, a country that doesn't have the opportunity to build up the riches that Russia has had, and hasn't had the opportunity to build up the influence that Zimbabwe has had. And this country has been slammed by sanctions by the West for decades at this point. That really shows you just how barbaric this Western system is. You are going to look at all these sanctions, what it's doing to Russia. Imagine how much worse it's affecting the people of Zimbabwe. Now, Kenyatta turned to sanctions as illegal, which they are, and assures Zimbabwe of Kenyatta's continued advocacy to ensure the restrictions are lifted. He says, this we consider being unfair, for these hardships were artificially created, and we continue to call on the international community to lift these illegal sanctions. And this is a very important point that he made. When you hear about Zimbabwe being this country, they have high inflation, people are so poor, Zimbabwe is always the excuse for why South Africa should not take their land back. They act like the fact that Zimbabwe actually took their land back is the reason why Zimbabwe is suffering, which is asinine. It's the sanctions. It's literally the sanctions. So if you're understanding, again, how these sanctions are affecting a big superpower like Russia, and look at a small country inside of, or it's not a small country, but a smaller country with a very much smaller economy inside of the African continent. Of course, the issues that are happening in Zimbabwe, from the inflation, from the high gas prices, from the economic depravity, are directly related to the sanctions. So we just have to make sure that as African people, we're very clear on who our enemies are. They've declared Zimbabwe an enemy. They've declared Venezuela and Cuba. They've declared these small countries that should be insignificant to Western interest, really. They've declared them enemies because they dared to exercise sovereignty. And that makes them an enemy in the eyes of the West, and that means that they're going to do everything they can to destabilize their economies, which doesn't make any logical sense. But that shows you, again, how barbaric this international system is. So kudos to Kenyatta, although I don't give him a lot of props because you all know how I feel about him. I think it was right to point this out, right to draw the parallels as far as the fact that this thing's happening over in Ukraine, and you're so concerned about the Ukrainian people, yet you're throwing these sanctions at Zimbabwe. At this point, what are you trying to prove? That should be the question to the United States. What are you trying to prove at this point when it comes to sanctioning this Southern African country? There's absolutely no reason to continue this policy. So let's go to the next story. I want us to understand media manipulation when it comes to these wars that are happening. And that's really why I want to talk about this. Now, media manipulation, and the reason why I say that is because right now, everything that is happening should show us that the imperialist entities are very anxiously trying to create a narrative for us. And they put things out there in the news for us because they want us to abide by it, even if it's not necessarily true. Now, I personally, I'm going to say, I don't know any Black people, any Africans in America who are okay with the paying a higher gas price. If any of you are if any of you know anyone, give me some feedback in the chat. But when I talk to people, African people in the US, I don't know anyone who has said, oh, yes, we'll pay more for gas so that we can help Ukraine. Actually, everyone who I've talked to is like, why can't the United States mind its business? Why can't the United States, what does that have to do with what's going on here? We're already suffering. Inflation's already high in this country. And inflation's high in the entire world right now. The price of gas is high right now. And yet the media is trying to tell us this narrative that we approve of this president taking these types of actions. So I just want to let everyone see this. It says Black Americans continue to be among President Biden's strongest supporters, with 2/3 approving of his job performance. But as with the public overall, the president's approval ratings among Black Americans fell over the course of 2021 and have not returned to the heights seen at the start of his term. It's inflation rate weighing on his ratings. Most Black Americans disapprove of Mr. Biden's handling of inflation, as do all Americans. This is even as they give him net positive marks for other issues, such as the handling of the pandemic and the economy more generally. Scrolling down some, it says they give him, yes, apparently that whoever Black people they interviewed gave Biden positive remarks for his handling of coronavirus. Again, this is all media manipulation to me because most people objectively think that this whole pandemic, the economy, it's just not even working a little bit for our people at this point. Now, scrolling down, I'm looking for, I believe they talk about a poll they did on Ukraine. It's not coming up. This might be actually the wrong article. But another thing that I did read that I think was very untrue is that a lot of our people are supporting Biden as he goes forward with sanctioning Russia, knowing that it's going to cost high gas prices for us because we support Ukraine. And that is completely asinine. That is completely asinine. First of all, most of our people are struggling to the point that we don't really care what's going on with Ukraine. Yet the media is going to push a narrative for us. And the reason why they're doing this, as the big thing I want us to understand, is that they want us to get into our minds ahead of time before the midterm elections, that we do support Biden, even if we don't, that we do think he's doing the right thing by sanctioning Russia that's causing the whole world to suffer right now. They want us to really play this inside. They want to play this inside of our minds because of the manipulation that they're trying to reinforce inside of us. So it's just a FYI as a people, do not listen to these media polls. Whenever they say that they polled a number of people, African people or whatever, if you're in the US, I encourage you, talk more to people who you actually know versus listening to the news, because they're going to continue to lie. It's all about narrative shaping right now. They're trying to shape a certain narrative of what's happening with this war, what's happening with the economy. And by the way, things are getting a lot worse as far as not just the US, but really the entire world economy, because we know everything's interlinked because of globalization. And as that happens, understand there's going to be a lot of scapegoats. They're going to blame things on Russia. They're going to blame things on Putin. And their whole reason for this is because they want to distract us and hope that we don't dare to rebel against the system, dare to organize against the system. We essentially have to accept what we're being offered. So that's just a perspective I wanted to give you all right there. All right, so last story I want to discuss, if I can find it, is, oh, here we go, Boko Haram. Something that we heard, it's funny how the media at one point will play certain stories all the time, and then like after a while, the boogeyman, they don't need a boogeyman to justify what they're doing in Africa, so these narratives go away. So former Boko Haram militants are going to be reintegrated into society, which I think is good. So let's see about what's going on with that. It says Boko Haram members have graduated from a de-radicalization program and are expected to be reintegrated into society soon, Nigeria authorities have said. Now, this is interesting to have a de-radicalization graduation. I've never heard of that, but this is what Nigeria is offering people who want to leave the group. It's a military-run initiative introduced in 2015 by the Nigerian government. It became operational in 2016 as part of its counterterrorism strategies. These are members who voluntarily agreed to lay down their arms and surrender to authorities. They were given special training, including vocational skills, religious reorientation, and psychological support to de-radicalize them before being reintegrated into society. So far, a total of 1,629 ex-Boko Haram members have completed the program, which is not a small number, obviously. There are still doubts in the society towards former Boko Haram members, given the level of violence the group has committed. The Boko Haram insurgency, which began in 2009, has caused the deaths of more than 350,000 people. Wow. With millions of others displaced in Nigeria and several other countries in the Lake Chad region. So this is an FYI. This is, I guess the solution in the eyes of the Nigerian government is to have a de-radicalization program. Now, of course, my problem with this is that does this de-radicalization program deal with the conditions that leads to a Boko Haram to arise out of the African continent. What I mean by that is, we know that these leaders, these groups, these militant groups, they don't just come out because they hate Africans. They don't just come out because they hate their people. It's about the economic conditions. The same thing that if you have Black communities that have economic viability, they have businesses, they have jobs, and there's no poverty, there's no wanting, you're not going to see gang violence arise inside of those communities, inside of Western societies. It's the same thing inside of African societies. There's a groundswell of poverty, really, that's happening inside of these countries that does not allow people to have access to things that are going to prevent them from being radicalized. So the more that we understand that that's really the central issue when it comes to people who are doing these things, that are joining these groups, the more that we'll start putting more emphasis on what is it that we can do to free our lands? What is it we can do to free the mineral potential and wealth that Africa has to provide for all of its children? And instead of relying on de-radicalization programs, we can rely on business opportunities. We can rely on community feeding programs, things that are going to actually go the long haul when it comes to turning people away from these types of groups. So that's really all I have. I'm going to play a brief commercial, and we're going to get back to the story as far as talking about what is going on inside of Tanzania 1 year since the death of John Magufuli. All right, everyone. So again, the whole premise of this video is that we understand how after African people have suffered in a number of ways under leaders who are puppets, after African people are essentially put inside of a position where we have no faith inside of our governments, we have no faith inside of the governing structures, that we basically are many times not going to look to national politicians to fill a certain void when it comes to decolonization. And decolonization could mean a lot of things. Decolonization obviously has to mean taking back your land and taking back your resources, right? And when you have a person like John Magufuli come and who wants to basically fill these big shoes that many of our people have completely took out of our subconscious, the idea that we don't have to be dependent on the West for aid, the idea that we can have enough provisions for ourselves to provide for ourselves, the idea that we do not have to give up our mineral resources in order to be able to live inside of this world. Whenever you have someone like John Magufuli come and fill those shoes, that's going to cause obviously a lot of support from the people on the ground, but also a lot of hatred from the enemies of African liberation, from the enemies of African progress. And he invited a lot of that. That's what we should understand. So I believe that when Magufuli was actually in power, that there was a lot of intentional efforts by the Western puppets the Western powers, that they wanted to find a way that they were going to get him out of position. They wanted to find a way, whether it was going to be internal politics or whether it was going to be his quote unquote failing health. They wanted to find a way to get him out of the picture. Now, obviously, a lot of people think that Magufuli was assassinated, and for good reason. And it's something that, honestly, how do you ever know? We certainly shouldn't discount that, because anyone who has that many enemies, who dies suddenly and very young, I hope that you would not automatically assume that what they tell you in the news is the reason why he was killed or the reason why he died. But even if, let's just say he wasn't, how quickly was it that they were able to replace him with someone who was going to reverse course and go the way of the international global world order? That's what they really wanted, and that's what they got. So what I want to talk about right now, first of all, is understanding the agenda that was set while Magufuli was still president over a year ago. No, not while he's still president, when he just died and when the new president was actually about to step in. This is the agenda that was set. The Institute for Security Studies, another very much Western imperialist institution, one that's going to tell you things from the mindset of the colonists. Look at how they were trying to poise for the president of Tanzania to basically go the opposite direction of Magufuli even before she took office. So again, this was in March of 2021. They said, can Tanzania's new president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, emerge from her predecessor's deep shadow? And again, you're going to see again why these people really hated Magufuli, and they're going to try to make it look like it was his COVID policies, and I just don't think that's the case. Tanzania's controversial president, John Magufuli, was officially declared dead on March 17th of a heart attack, though many suspected with COVID-19. And when people say they suspect it's COVID-19, I would say based on what? Based on what you want it to be? Like they wanted him to die from COVID-19 so that they could say, aha. I don't believe that at all. I don't know how people can assume something whenever they don't have any proof of it, but this is what the media does. They put a narrative out there and many people just run with it. They said they believe the ruling Chama Cha Mapinduzi, so CCM party, couldn't acknowledge this because Magufuli claimed that Tanzania had rid itself of the deadly disease by prayer. Magufuli came into office in 2015 with great promise. He swept corruption and incompetence from the bureaucracy and rechanneled government revenues wasted on graft, unnecessary red tape, and pomp and ceremony into essential services such as hospitals. But over the years, power seemed to go to his head. Again, this is in the mind of the colonists. He became increasingly autocratic, centralizing power and repressing criticism and opposition from political party, media, and civil society. A 2018 law imposed jail terms for questioning the accuracy of official statistics. On democracy, he clearly failed. On economics, his record was more ambiguous. Magufuli clamped down on foreign corporations, particularly mining houses, accusing them of stealing Tanzania's wealth. And my question is, what was the lie in that? He imposed strict measures, especially on foreign mining companies, to force them to share more of Tanzania's natural resources. Again, what's the crime in that? This resource nationalism, this is what they're calling it. I want to highlight that. They're saying resource nationalism was popular at home, and the government arguably used the proceeds to fund more public infrastructure. Okay. But to many critics, Magufulis legacy will be shaped mainly by his last year in office when he failed to control a runaway pandemic by essentially denying its power, if not its very existence. And this also, by the way, I want to say is hilarious that they're trying to make it seem like Magufuli was incompetent because of his COVID policies. I'm not saying I agree with all of his stances when it comes to the COVID-19. A few things that he did, obviously, that really pissed off the West was that he was very much like, we're not going to close down. And the other thing is that he said, we're not going to push these vaccines, right? If we think about the African continent during the COVID-19 pandemic, no one has proven to us that had he done something different, that things would have been better, because Africa was really spared by COVID-19. We don't necessarily have the reason why. We don't necessarily, I don't think anyone really knows exactly why. We have our suggestions. Obviously, we could be in better health or things like that. But overall, they're even estimating, some people are estimating that possibly 80% of Africa could have even had COVID-19, but not even have known. I don't know if that's true, but if that is the case, that shows that how COVID-19 really did not have that effect on Africa. So they're trying to act like Tanzania was thrown into darkness because of his COVID policies, but we know that's not true. Like, that's not true for any part of Africa except for the Northern African countries that overwhelmingly are not actually inhabited by Africans, which is interesting. And also South Africa, which is also interesting because South Africa is controlled outwardly by a white minority. So it's very interesting that for the most part, African countries between the North and South Africa have not had that bad of an effect, or COVID did not have that bad of an effect on these African countries. And yet they're going to pretend that Magufuli basically killed all his people in Tanzania. And so therefore his legacy is completely screwed, right? But here comes their savior. It says his vice president was a little more than a figurehead. She stepped into his large shoes. She faces a mammoth challenge in managing and many hope reversing her predecessor's legacy, especially with COVID denialism. And again, they still have not proven, nor has anyone proven when it comes to this, how Africa was affected. What could have been done differently for Africa that was not as affected as the West? Now let's go on a little bit more. They quote this guy, Peter Leon, who's a mining law expert at Herbert Smith Free Hills in Johannesburg. He says he hopes that Hassan will reduce the hostility towards foreign investors, dial down the rhetoric, and help improve the investment climate. Let's just spend more time thinking about what this man is saying. So again, their issue, they're going to pretend it's COVID-19. I don't believe that's it, because number one, again, we don't know. Africa was not as affected by COVID-19 as other places. And we don't really know what could have been done differently. There's countries that locked down, there's countries that didn't lock down, and there's really no proof as to like who does things right when it comes to this virus, right? So they're going to throw this out there. It's COVID-19. That's why we hated Magufuli. No, I don't think that's it. It's the real reason is because of his hostility to these foreign entities that wanted to mine out Tanzania. And Tanzania, like many parts of Africa, very, very mineral rich part of Africa. And he's saying that he's hoping that this new president will reduce the hostility towards foreign investors. Foreign investors should absolutely be treated hostile to the African continent. Foreign investors have replaced foreign colonists. So if you're trying to reduce hostility towards foreign investors, you're trying to reduce hostility towards the colonists. That's really what you're saying. They said a critical first step to re-examine Magufuli's 2017 legislation is increased state ownership and control over mining. The law gives at least 16% of ownership of mining companies and bans the export of unprocessed minerals to force local processing and benefication. So again, he's doing something that's going to internally help the Tanzanian people. He's forcing them that these minerals are going to be processed in Tanzania. You're not going to just take them and process them wherever you want. They hated him for this, right? So scrolling down some more, they said that some analysis suggests Hassan could reverse Magufuli's interventionist economic stance and return to a more business-friendly economic policies, especially if she falls under, remember the previous president of Tanzania, and I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Kikwete, that's my guess, his influence. And this is exactly what happened. That's what I want to emphasize. You're going to see she's being advised by people who are very close with the foreign entities, and this is one of the people. So the previous president, they're saying if you get close to him, then maybe you'll be able to reverse course on Magufuli's policies. Others note because of discouraging investment, Magufuli's policies have led to cronyism and lack of transparency. That's what they're saying. They're saying that Kikwete is that under Kikwete, this model was associated with high levels of corruption and unproductive rent seeking. And that's why he really undone a lot of the previous previous policies of Kikwete's administration, is because he understood that this previous president of Tanzania was really robbing the people blind. And yet they're going to pretend that his role inside of Tanzania was better than Magufuli's. Again, this is the deception of the West. So I let you see just now. This is how they're poising that Samia Suluhu is going to be better than Magufuli. She's going to undo a lot of what he has done, and she's going to instead be close to foreign investors. She's going to intermingle with the foreign economy. Now, again, this is before she took office. That's the thing I want to emphasize, that this is before she even took office. This is when a lot of people didn't know if she was going to go Magufuli's direction. A lot of people were already projecting that she wouldn't. And to me, that sounds more like a setup. They're trying to lay a foundation and say that, okay, essentially, you're going to go this way because that's going to be the way that's going to benefit the mining class. So let's just understand a little bit more. What is it that Magufuli was doing inside of Tanzania that really was pissing off so many of these foreign entities? So he was confronting minors. The change, sorry, my computer's acting crazy. The changes began in when Magufuli, he imposed a ban on exporting, again, unprocessed mineral ores. Okay, containers holding copper gold concentrates began to gather in the port of Dar es Salaam. Magufuli appointed a committee to chemically examine the contents of containers which belonged to Acacia Mining, a subsidiary of Barrick Gold. The committee claimed that the containers held more than 14 times the quantity of gold of Acacia had reported. So the company, the mining company, was lying. They were taking more than what they said they were, and Magufuli held them accountable. They concluded that the company has been trying to swindle the government and has probably been doing so for years. Very common under neocolonialism. These companies, they say that they're doing certain things, having certain deals. They're always taking more than what they're saying they're taking, and many times all they have to do is pay off some person that doesn't care about what they do, and that's very easy for them to do under neocolonialism. They concluded that the company has been trying to swindle the government and had probably been doing so for years. I read that, sorry. A series of estimates circulated about how much Tanzania might have lost over the years. Acacia Mining flatly denied the allegations, of course. But then earlier this month, the National Assembly passed 3 bills, which essentially overhauled Tanzania's mining policy regime. The royalty rate on gold was raised from 4% to 6%. The government was entitled to 16% share of mining company stock without compensation, taking back the minerals without saying that they're going to compensate those people who say that they own them. They empowered to purchase a further 34%. The regulation banning exportation of concentrates and unprocessed minerals has the permanence of an active law, and 1% clearing fee is levied on mining exports. This was a break with the past. Magufuli's austerity and intolerance for corruption were popularly interpreted as a departure from the clientelism and expanding government spending popularities associated with Jakaya Kikwete, his immediate predecessor. But if the first act of Magufuli's presidency represented a break from Kikwete, the next signifies a break with former presidents Ali Mwinyi and Benjamin Mkapa, I think. Now, Mwinyi presided over the liberalization of the economy and privatization of the early 1990s. So again, you have presidents of Tanzania selling out the people. Liberalizing the economy means essentially they're going to allow for all these private European and American businessmen or imperialist entities to come in and buy up the resources of Tanzania. That was what the predecessor was doing. Magufuli put a new legislation that explicitly wrote down development agreements out in Tanzania's law. This move not only tears up contracts with mining companies, but also tears up consensus on mining policy within the ruling party. And this I want to emphasize is that when you have someone come into a presidential office in Africa and they're saying, okay, we're going to continue business as usual, that can let you know right there that that person is not going to change anything. But when someone comes in and starts tearing up old contracts that the people were handcuffed by and had to adhere to the terms of, because keep in mind, these contracts many times are being made 20, 30, 40 years before you were even born. So you're being depleted. You're being locked into a contract that was meant to starve the people of Tanzania. You're being locked into that contract from way long ago. And you don't even have anything to do with what was negotiated by the former corrupt president. That's a real issue. But when someone comes in and starts tearing up the contracts, that's again going to make him a pariah to the international community. So the funny thing is that as much as obviously these business entities want to play up like Magufuli was this reckless person, if you understand and think about all the stuff he was doing, and he actually said the reason why he's doing it is that he wants to be sure that for Tanzania to start working with outside foreign entities that they first have to get their stuff together. They have to get control over their own resources. They have to be able to process their own resources. Before we start allowing you to come in and take our resources and go wherever you want to go, we have to get control of this sector ourselves. So that was where he was coming from. We have to get control of what we're doing, get control of the resources, get control for our own betterment, make sure that we're not getting depleted, make sure that they're not stealing from us, make sure they're not lying and fudging numbers to us. And if we can actually get stabilized on that, and then at a future date, maybe we can trade fairly with the international community, not the way that other African countries trade with the international community, to where there's no say. It's basically these foreign capitalists doing what they want, running amok, and no one's going to hold them accountable. So that was his goal when he was doing these things. So if you think about what Magufuli was offering for the people of Tanzania, and think about how crazy of a stark contrast that is to the other place in the African continent, he was offering that the people make that we rid themselves of the corruption from the previous administrations, that this liberalized economy that allows private interests to come into Africa and buy up whatever they want. He wanted to get rid of that. He said, all these contracts that you think you're going to hold us to, you're not going to hold us to them. We're going to make sure that all these contracts are fair. That's another thing he was offering. And then another thing he was offering was that we're going to make sure that these companies that have been depleting us, that you're going to be held accountable. So what could it possibly be bad about any of the things that he was doing? That's the question for the international community. Like, they wanted to make it seem like his policies were so arbitrary, his policies were so backwards, but logic says and common sense says that his policies had a direct potential to reverse a long legacy of colonialism had they actually been able to develop and actually continue. Unfortunately, though, we know that they were not able to develop and not able to continue because Magufuli was taken out. Many people believe, including myself. And even if you don't believe he was taken out, he was very conveniently replaced by someone who was very close to the previous president, someone who was willing to be advised by the previous president, who also sold out the people. That's who he was basically replaced by. So we're going to finish out with talking more about Samia Suluhu, because y'all might think that I'm just railing against her for no reason, that, you know, I'm not giving her a chance. That's something I've been accused of when it comes to certain leaders. You're just focusing on the negative, you know, give her a chance. She can't fill Magufuli's shoes, you know, and it's not about filling someone's shoes. It's about, to me, like, if you're a vice president, you have a duty. Like, you, first of all, vice president is really an office that does not carry significance in the active form. Your job, to me, is to make sure that if something happens to this president, that what this person was doing continues, and that their legacy that you're upholding, because you didn't win election as the president, you won election as the vice president. Now, of course, the president's no longer here. It doesn't mean you have to do everything that the former president did, but you're supposed to, at very minimum, like, try to continue the work that person was doing, or the spirit of what that person was, especially if you have someone who's trying to do good for the people. But to have a vice president that, again, she was not elected president, she was elected with him, but he was the elected president. And someone who wasn't elected to be the president comes in and fulfills that position, and so quickly goes in the reverse opposite direction of that person. Very telling, very much telling, and very much convenient for the imperialists and for the capitalists who wanted control of Tanzania's mines. So let's talk about what is my beef with Samia Suluhu. Hopefully this article, sometimes these articles time out, so hopefully this one didn't. Okay, so Tanzania's new president, and again, remember, it was projected, it was put out there before she even took office. This is what she can do to reverse what Magufuli was, what he did. It says Tanzania's new president turns her back on Magufuli. By the way, again, this is written from the gaze of foreign capitalists, right? Although masks were nowhere to be seen, Tanzania's first female president took a bold stance against her COVID-19 denying predecessor in her major first speech since taking office. And again, this is the deception. They want you to think that they didn't like Magufuli because Magufuli did not take COVID serious, or did not take COVID as they wanted him to take it, right? This is what they want us to think. So they always put that in the beginning of the article. Oh, she's changing her policy on COVID. Now, in her first speech, she says, we cannot isolate ourselves as if we were an island, she says, signaling that she would not only end Magufuli's coronavirus denialism, but would act to improve strained relations with investors in multinational companies. Red flag, because the reason why he was hated by investors in international companies wasn't because he was doing something bad for the people. It's because he prioritized the people over the foreign interests. That's why they hated him. But now she's going to basically engage with them in a different new way. By the way, this article was written for context on April 14, 2021, so not long after she took office. Addressing government and military officials, the former vice president announced plans to appoint a panel of scientific experts to advise on how best to curb the spread of the pandemic, a radical shift from Magufuli, who gained notoriety as one of the few leaders who denied the virus, right? We're going to talk more about who she got to advise her. The speech suggested that Hassan, who studied economics in the UK and has worked at the United Nations, so she's someone who has been in those circles before she was even president or vice president. She would seek to distance herself from the legacy of her former boss and raise cautious hopes among observers that Tanzania could change course after 5 years of creeping authoritarianism and growing isolation under Magufuli. And this again a reminder of how disgraceful the press is coming from the West. They're going to ignore the fact that Magufuli was trying to reverse the power structure, was trying to give the power back to Tanzania and away from the foreign capitalists. And they take all that he did and make it into a creeping authoritarianism and growing isolation. That's all that they want you to see about him. Now, it says, we are extremely encouraged with the signals that we are hearing from the new leadership in Tanzania. That's Dr. John Ngengasong, who's the director of African Center for Disease Control. Hassan has not been happy with the way Magufuli was running the country, but she didn't have a strong say because she was vice president. She wasn't elected to have a strong say. Therefore, I expect more than what we have already witnessed, okay? Scrolling down some, it says, some moves that she did was that, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. A senior Western diplomat compared Hassan to Margaret Thatcher, the former UK Prime Minister. She said Thatcher was basically looked down on by a lot of establishment guys, but she got the upper hand. Hassan has to balance that as well. It's a very interesting comparison. Now, their problem with Magufuli, again, he was dismissive of foreign investors, prompting critics to dub Tanzania as the Cuba of East Africa. Yes, he banned exports of unprocessed ore, as we talked about, and led a $190 billion tax dispute against global mining companies that is now part of Barrick Gold. But Hassan was quoted as saying she wants challenges on taxes and other issues with mining companies quickly resolved, adding, let's not reach a point where we start to flex our muscles against investors. Who says this in a position of power? Like, if you are the one who has the resources, if you are the one who has the power, Tanzania, like, if we understood the situation on face value and didn't understand that Africa is being controlled by these different entities, Tanzania is in a position of power. They have the resources. They have the leverage to basically say, these are the stipulations. If you want the resources, you have to go this way. If you don't, go get them elsewhere. But she says, let's not reach a point where we start to flex our muscles against investors. Why not? Other countries flex their muscles against investors. Sovereign countries flex their muscles because they understand that they are the ones who are in a position of power. And yet, in Africa, we are supposed to just bow down to the needs or the wills of these investors who come into our countries and take what they're not supposed to take more than they're supposed to take, and basically do these types of corrupt deals. We're supposed to not flex our muscles to these types of people. Her comments were welcomed by an executive at a national resource company, saying she's saying the right things. Magufuli not only did not have an understanding of what incentives investors need, but also had no interest. He didn't even pick up the phone because Magufuli didn't call all the investors and say, hey, what do you want? What do you need? How can I help you? Again, who's the one that holds the power in the situation? The president of Tanzania is supposed to call you up. You're not a citizen of Tanzania. You don't own, you're not someone who's of the people of Tanzania. You expect the president to call you up and say, how can I help you? And I just hope this is reminding you all, these investors are colonists. These people are colonists, all of them. They want colonial privileges inside of African countries. And if you're not willing to offer that, then they're going to do everything they can to put their money into media campaigns to slam you and make you look like you're just some authoritarian dictator. And that's what they did to Magufuli, which is why I understand he didn't leave Tanzania much, because why would I leave to go inside of these places with you people and you don't even have basic respect for the people of Tanzania and the sovereignty of Tanzania? I wouldn't either. During her first trip abroad as president, Hassan signed an agreement with Uganda President Yoweri Museveni and France's Total to build a long-delayed oil pipeline linking their country. France's Total is a country that's actually listed inside of the AUMD, decolonization, We Charge Colonialism document. It's one of the companies that is very much a colonist company inside of African continent, controlled by France. Let's scroll down some more. Telecom investors said Hassan wants to get closer to foreign investors. She's slowly purging away those close to Magufuli. Those are good signs to them, but it is still too early to cheer. A senior government official stressed that Hassan was implementing the party's policies, just with a different style. We're dealing with a party that has a short knee-jerk anti-market and anti-free speech instincts. That's how they're going to label them, right? Now, I want to go to, so this article was put out on April 2021. And, maybe you said, hey, Tierney, that was really early. You didn't give her a chance to develop. I'm sure she changed her policies. I'm sure maybe she didn't do everything that she said she was going to do. Let's actually look at what some of the things she has done. And keeping in mind, this was in the beginning, she's signaling to the Western investors, I'm going to do what you want. She's signaling to the imperialists, we're going to do things your way. Let's see if she actually did those things. So who does she get in bed with as far as foreign bodies? She gets in bed with Tony Blair, the same Tony Blair that was Prime Minister of Britain, the same Tony Blair that conspired, against Africans many times. That Tony Blair. She gets into bed with this colonist, right? So what are Mr. Blair's businesses in Tanzania? That's what people were asking. This is in October 2021, so the end of last year. A section of Tanzania's scholars, activists, and members of the general public have in the past few days been sharing their concerns with the activities by former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair in Tanzania, while some questioning his motives behind recent 2 visits to the East African nation. Tony Blair has made 2 visits to Tanzania, with President Samia Suluhu Hassan being the host of each visit. Now, compare and contrast. Magufuli, known to not want to deal with these European colonialists. If he's going to have visits or talk with people, it's for the most part going to be people from African continent. He'll go to the AU meetings. But here, she's inviting Tony Blair into Tanzania, not once, but twice. On July 22nd, President Samia hosted Mr. Blair at the Dar es Salaam Steakhouse, where the two, according to official reports, discussed ways through which Tanzania and Mr. Blair's Institute for Global Change can work together in areas of technology, energy, agriculture, and COVID-19. Now, this was probably the biggest slap in the face, I think, when I first heard this story. Not only did you reverse course on many of the policies of Magufuli, but when Magufuli's big issue with COVID-19 was that the West is driving this narrative, the West is telling you that you need to do something, and that's not the way. We're just not going to do something because they say we're going to do it. Well, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to go a different direction, but if you're going to call in a reinforcement, she calls in Tony Blair to advise her on COVID-19. Tony Blair, who has no qualification. Is he a doctor? He's as much as a doctor as Bill Gates, I guess. Causing him to advise her on that. And then it's also, again, technology, energy, and agriculture. Why are you calling in Tony Blair for this? This organization was founded by Tony Blair in 2016. It's a London-based nonprofit. They say their mission is to support political leaders and governments to open, inclusive, and prosperous societies in a globalized world. Globalization always equals colonialism for us, obviously. By developing policy and advising governments. That's what he does. He advises governments. On September 29, 2021, President Samia once again hosted Mr. Blair, this time at the Dodoma State House, with the agenda of the meeting not revealed to the public, raising suspicions over the exact motives behind the former leader of the UK's Labour Party's activities in Tanzania. So first time he comes, she says, he's advising me on COVID, he's advising me on technology, he's advising me on agriculture. Again, makes no sense why you need him to advise you. What qualifications does he even have inside of these areas? Whatever. But second time he comes, she doesn't even feel the need to put out a statement on what he's there for. She doesn't tell the public what the meeting was about. She doesn't disclose anything. So now people are seeing, okay, you're inviting this global imperialist into our country, not once, but twice, and you're not even going to tell us why. Now, Mr. Blair has also traveled to Zanzibar, the section of Tanzania, and held talks with semi-autonomous archipelago President Hussein Mwinyi, the previous president of Tanzania. Among other things, he promised his host to help him on improving the government systems and building strong institutions in the government. His services aren't cheap. That's the other thing. It's not some like, oh, she can't say he's doing it for free. This is someone that comes with a price tag. And I bet the price tag is not just money. The price tag is probably also investments, deals, and things like that, as it normally is with these types of people. Perhaps there has been no staunchest observer of Mr. Blair's growing interest with Tanzania than Dr. Thabit Jacob, a faculty member at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden and a keen follower of Tanzania's developments. He says Tony Blair, back in Chamwino, which is Tanzania's state house in Dodoma, his services to autocrats and wannabe dictators aren't cheap. He commented on Twitter following Tony Blair's second visit to Tanzania. He asked the question, how much are we paying him? That has not come out, obviously, which brings up the question of transparency. Mr. Blair, he was interviewed in the African Report. He said he's the man who whispers in the ear of Africa's presidents. There's too many of those, right? According to the magazine, over the years, he's offered services to Muammar Gaddafi, Guinea Conakry's, then Alpha Conde, Togo's President Faure Gnassingbe, and then Rwanda's Paul Kagame, to name a few. Personally, I don't know how much I believe that he was advising Gaddafi, especially when he was a part of NATO whenever they got rid of him, but hey, whatever. So persistent has been Dr. Jacob's inquiries into the real motives behind Mr. Blair's visits to Tanzania that one member of Mr. Blair's team reached out to him to clarify things. He said, in Africa, our support to most governments, our support is free to them, he says. We are not non-profit organization, same with Zanzibar. So let's scroll down a little more. So presidential mission to rebrand Tanzania. That's what again, she's on, to rebrand Tanzania. The track record of advising world leaders on image building, some observers are skeptical that Mr. Blair may be planning to sell the same service to the government, and particularly to President Samia. Analysts point to President Samia's interest in rebranding Tanzania as evidence that the hidden state will most likely become the latest clientele of Mr. Blair's services. Scrolling down some more. Okay, given his history of providing services to world leaders, We have no respect for democratic and human rights principles. Some analysts are concerned that this is exactly, or leaders who have no respect for human rights principles, which is funny if you look at the list of people who he has been advising. Again, I don't believe he was advising Gaddafi. That's BS. But I do believe it says he was advising Kagame. It said he was advising some other people who I was... Alpha Conde, just taken out of power, Far Gasingbe. He's the guy in Togo who has been in power. I think he's one of the longest serving longest dictators in Africa. So these are the people who he has been close to. But they say the public has the right to know if he's providing services to the government or not. Foreign analysts working with the European countries' embassies in Dar es Salaam who prefer anonymity agreed and emphasized transparency. Yet, is that going to be given to the people of Tanzania? More than likely, it will not be given to the people of Tanzania. So, if you see Tanzania 1 year after the death of John Magufuli, 1 year after the death of someone who not only challenged Western hegemony inside of Tanzania, but actively worked to keep the resources in Tanzania controlled by the people of Tanzania. 1 year later, we have a president who's being advised by not only the previous president, she's advised by the previous president who has made so many deals with these mining companies that it was basically corruption everywhere when Magufuli took office, right? She's being advised by him, and he's also very beloved by the international capitalists, right? And she's being advised by Tony Blair, the former prime minister of the UK. She has reversed course on a number of things. She has called for engaging with these international institutions. She's been on state visits everywhere. She goes out of Tanzania. She goes into the West. She goes to these institutions. She has a history with the United Nations. This is the person that replaced Magufuli. If you want to be a conspiracy theorist or call people conspiracy theorists for believing that this man must have been assassinated, I would just say draw common sense parallels. Someone who takes stances against minors is someone who puts their life at risk. That's my strong opinion. Anytime you have an African president who's going to challenge financial interests of the capitalists, and that has been always the case. Look at what happened with Thomas Sankara. When he started challenging the financial interests of these colonialists, they killed him. So many African leaders throughout the African continent, when you start challenging those things, they do away with you very quickly. And Magufuli did that, and how quickly he died and was replaced by someone who would completely reverse course. So where is Tanzania 1 year after Magufuli? Tanzania, unfortunately, is probably going to go right back to what it was without Magufuli being there, because unfortunately in the African continent and places throughout the diaspora and in the world, really, we still think that these national politics are going to liberate us. I wanted to emphasize in the beginning of the video, the setup of Tanzania, he has to have someone from Zanzibar. He has to have a dual power sharing. So it doesn't even necessarily be that person has to follow in line with all of his protocols or all of his policies. Just that person be from that region. And that's the person who he chose. Now, he chose her. I don't know if he was aware of her neoliberal policies or aware of how driven she was by Western interests, but he did choose her to be the vice president. And yet the people of Tanzania are going to have to go on this roller coaster ride, a roller coaster of having someone pushing for their interests and now having someone push for foreign interests inside of their country. That's the devastating effect of national politics on the African people, is that we really are going through roller coaster rides. If we're lucky enough to get a John Magufuli, there's no way to be ensured that he's not going to get assassinated or not going to die under mysterious circumstances, and that there's not going to be replaced with someone who does the exact opposite. So where is it for African people to go? Where is it for us to do? What is it for us to do to protect our interests and to protect our own people? In this current world, we don't have that many options. And that's why we have to look outside of these national politics. And so that's the conversation I would like to start with that. Also understanding that, again, as I said in the beginning of the video, Samia Suluhu, get over the fact that she's a woman. Get over the fact that she's Africa's only woman president, I think, right now. Get over that. If she's doing the same thing as the previous president to Magufuli, then look at her the exact same way. I've never been one of those people who understood how people could just hyper focus on gender and not focus on what the person is doing. I mean, it's me personally, my heroes who are women are not heroes because they're women. They're heroes because they fought vigorously. You know, Winnie Mandela, one of my heroes, she's not my hero because she was a woman. She's my hero because she stood up for and stood against anti-apartheid and also stood against the continuance of apartheid, even whenever her husband made a turn to where he started taking more policies that would allow the continuance of apartheid. She still stood up and said that's not right. She still wanted a different Africa, a different South Africa, and she still was ostracized for that. That's my hero, not because she's a woman, but because she stood against colonialism. So people who want to make this woman into a hero without her having to have done anything that actually warrants that, to me, you're spitting in the face of women revolutionaries who did represent that. You're spitting in the face of someone like a Winnie Mandela, like a Assata Shakur, people who had radical politics and that did so even whenever it was unpopular to do so. You're spitting in the face of that legacy whenever you hyper-focus on the fact that it's a woman president. If you recall, whenever Samia Suluhu Hassan was first elected, who sends her a tweet? Vice President Kamala Harris. Do I care that that's a woman? I do not care. I care about her policies. I care about her stances towards my people. I care about the fact that she's being utilized by this political system. That's what I care about. There's a new Supreme Court justice in the U.S. that's going to be a Black woman. Do I care that it's a woman? I don't care. I care about how she's going to rule when it comes to my people. I don't care about Ikanjo Iwala and the WTO. I don't care about that. We have to get wise to these tricks from the imperialists. They're going to keep tricking us as long as we keep falling for it. And as many of us might think that they didn't fall for it, I did see this as something widely reported, widely celebrated. And personally, I suspect that if the president of Tanzania were not replaced, if Magufuli was not replaced with a female successor, that a lot of people would probably be paying more attention to what's going on inside of this country, the fact that the power dynamics are changing at drastic speed and at a drastic rate. So this is just a call. We can't fall for these identity politics when it comes to liberation. Are you for the people? Are you against the people? And also, we cannot get locked into these national politics. We have to think beyond these institutions. We have to think about what sovereignty looks like among the masses of the people. What good is it to have a revolutionary president like Magufuli, but not have the people organized in such a way that president's agendas are going to outlast his life, outlast his administration? Until we all get like-minded and start also having our own policies against these minors, our own policies against these foreign investors, our own mindset that says, hey, you can't come on this side of this town and think you're going to be doing things. Because I see videos all the time on YouTube, videos where you see of different foreign investors or foreign companies that are coming in and doing horrible things to Africa, coming in and flooding like natural resources, lands, forests, and polluting them. I see videos all the time on YouTube of the people recording these things. But guess what? Until we get organized in such a way that they can't do those types of things, that they're risking their own business interests by even coming into that territory, then yes, we're going to continue to be in this position that we are in today. So understand that this goes beyond getting a new Magufuli in office. This goes towards getting a Magufuli-minded people, internally minded people, people who are going to push for the policies even when these people are not there. That's what we have to focus on as African people. So I hope I gave you some food for thought. I definitely do not have any good hopes 1 year in as for what this president is going to do. She has too many close ties with these imperialist puppets, talk too much good for the imperialist system. And so I can clearly see what she's positioning herself to be and what she's positioning Tanzania to be. So I hope you all, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe you still want to give her a chance, but at the bare minimum, I hope you all are at least questioning the narratives that are being put out that, hey, we have a woman president, therefore all things are going to continue to be good. No, things are happening at a drastic speed that are going against the interests of Tanzania's people, and we have to keep abreast of that. So that's all I have on this. I hope you all enjoyed, and of course, I will see you all in the next video.